Hey there! Today we'll have a look at a pen that was lent to me by a fellow pen enthusiast. Thanks a lot. And I think this is going to be very interesting, not only because it has a specialty nib on it, but also because it's quite an interesting pen. The pen is by the brand Sailor, and we're talking about the King of Pen. Now, I have reviewed the King of Pen before, but that was the Ebonite model, which is very rounded off. And this is the King of Pen Professional Gear. And that is a, I would say, more classical looking flat top and, well, flat bottom fountain pen. It comes in this box, relatively simple but still quite nice, I would say, with a little user manual and no less than 2 cartridges, because it is a cartridge converter filled pen. Now, I'm going to cover the parts of the pen that I like about it, what I don't like about it, and then I'll do a writing sample. The King of Pen by Sailor is their flagship model, like the 149 from Montblanc, the M1000 for Pelican. Sailor has the King of Pen, not King of Pens, but the King of Pen. Okay, and this, as I said, is the Pro Gear version of that. And to be honest, I may actually like this a bit better than the regular King of Pen. Very classic looking pen, a lot of black, a lot of gold. It's not a huge pen in length, but it's definitely very girthy. Okay, if we start at the top of the pen right there, the finial, you can see this nice little anchor, the logo of Sailor, and I did notice that it is actually sort of off-key with the clip, so it's not entirely straight, but maybe that's intended, I don't know. We have a clip. The clip is fairly springy enough to be used comfortably, I would say. And you have this large center band which says Sailor Japan, founded 1911, and this actually has, I kind of like that, a decent textured bit. I don't know how well you can see that, but there's nice texture there. And you have a taper down, and at the end cap there's nothing. It's not a piston filled pen, unfortunately, so it's just an end cap which has nothing at the bottom. Okay, now it has a giant nib, as you can see here. But let's first look at the section. So you have the threads here, a little gold band section that tapers down and then flares out a little bit, and then a big feed and a large nib. Now this is not just any nib, this is the King Eagle nib, and I will discuss that a bit more in the writing sample. And the writing sample, by the way, was also added to the series of videos I did on the Sailor nibs. The King Eagle nib is pretty much 3 nibs on top of each other, giving you a lot of line variation depending on the angle you use, and it's pretty unique. So it's easier to show that in the writing sample than really try to discuss it here. What you will get is an enormous nib that has a lot of nice features to it. As you can see, it looks pretty unique, and it's definitely large. It's 21 karat gold, and it says 1911 on it as well. It has that anchor. Okay, now as I said, this pen is very simply cartridge converter filled, so you get this, one of these small capacity Sailor cartridges, and you have a little ink window right there in the giant metal bit on the section, so that you can see how much ink is left in your pen. Alright, so that's the parts of the pen. Now what do I like about it, what do I not like about it? Well, there are a few things I really like about it. First of all, it is a bigger Sailor model. And as I said, it's not so much in the length, but it's definitely in the girth. I don't typically use a lot of Sailor pens because I just can't use them. The 1911 large is already quite small for me. And this pen has much more girth, is much wider, and in that regard makes, for me, for a much more pleasant pen. And I really enjoy that. You can post the pen if you want to, and then it becomes really big, but I still find it pretty well balanced, probably because it's a fairly light pen to begin with. There's not a lot of metal parts, and you have this giant center band which actually puts the weight right there and not at the top there. So I think that's very interesting. Things I don't like about it so much: first of all, I have to say something about this nib. Clearly a spectacular nib, and that really adds to the enjoyment of the pen. But you can also buy this with, I thought, medium and broad nibs, not fine and medium nibs, but I could be wrong there. So the regular lineup of nibs is not that spectacular, but you can add these specialty nibs to it. You should contact your retailer for that. Now, the things I don't like about it so much, well, one thing I have pointed out a lot with Sailor is that these converters really don't hold a lot of ink. I measured the capacity, and it's about 0.5 milliliter of ink, which is even less than a normal converter holds. And if you have a nib that is as broad and juicy as this one, I think this goes up to about 4B, so quadruple broad, you burn through ink like there's no tomorrow. And that, I think, really is a wasted opportunity. If Sailor could have made this into a piston filler, that would make things a lot more interesting. Even if ink capacity was only twice as much, you'd already be able to use this pen a lot more, because with this nib and this ink capacity, I can use it for about 1 A4 page and then it's dry. So, I mean, that's not really conducive to wonderful writing experience, smooth and beautiful as the nib may be. Okay, now a unique nib design. It is one of the Nakahara nibs. That also means that that's a very special high-end nib Sailor does. That comes at a price. So, as I said, I borrowed this from someone, but I do recommend you to look up the price of a Sailor King of Pen professional gear with a King Eagle nib. You're not talking about pocket change. These are very expensive pens, especially with that nib option. I think the last one, I tried a regular professional gear King of Pen at some point, so without the King Eagle nib in Amsterdam, and I think that one was already close to 800 euros, just the pen body and the regular medium nib. You can imagine that such a specialty nib adds quite a bit to the cost. Okay, so having said all of this, what do I think about it? I think it's an interesting pen. I like this model a lot. The nib is definitely spectacular, but as I said, quality like that really comes at a price. So this is not a pen you will buy for $150. Okay, couple of measurements before we do the writing sample. It weighs 36 grams in total, 16 grams in the cap, 20 in the body. Capped length is 142 millimeters. Sorry, 142.5 millimeters. It's 5.61 inches. Uncapped, 125.5 millimeters, 4.94 inches. So really, it's not such a big pen. But posted 163.1 to 6.42 inches. Barrel diameter, and here you can see the girth, 11.8 to 15.3 millimeters. That's 0.46 to 0.60 inches. And section diameter, 12.1 to 12.9 millimeters. That's 0.48 to 0.50 inches. Let's do a writing sample. Thanks a lot for lending this pen to me. I really appreciate it. Guys, I hope this was useful so far, and I'll gladly see you later. And just for the record, I know there's a lot of cars outside. I know. Bye! Okay, so here we go with this nib. This is the King Eagle. And the King Eagle is pretty much 3 nibs on top of each other, making for a very unique profile and very fascinating tipping as well. And to be honest, of all the nibs, the Sailor nibs I have been able to try out now, this is probably my favorite. So here we have the Sailor King Eagle, and like with the King Cobra, you can use this pen almost perpendicular to the paper and get a decent, I would say, medium line. But as you move down and reduce that angle, you start to get a much wider, broader, juicier line. And that for me is an absolute joy to use. This is an ultra wet nib, and I do think this would benefit from that Emperor attachment to make sure the ink flow keeps up. But here you have something truly special. Again, Hebrew style grind, so finer downstrokes, broader horizontal strokes, and it's just extremely fascinating to see how extremely wide this nib is. This is ultra broad. Now, of course, you pay dearly for this nib, especially on a bigger pen like this, the King of Pen professional gear. But it is an absolute pleasure to use. Very smooth, very, very juicy and wet, and the line variation is spectacular. So don't expect too much in the way of flex here, but the nib more than makes up for that just because of its unique shape. Okay, hope this was useful, and I'll gladly see you later.